After the terror attacks in Paris and San Bernardino, the focus of the presidential race has definitely shifted sharply to national security and foreign policy. It's an issue that pulled Democrats down for the better part of 2 decades when Republicans ran on law and order issues from the 60s through the 80s. That's at least what our next guest is suggesting through a Wall Street Journal article about history perhaps repeating itself. Here's one quote for you. The days when the Democrats could claim to be the party of personal or national security are long gone. In 1968, Richard Nixon tagged them with it. This time, they've done it to themselves. Daniel Henninger is deputy editorial page editor for the Wall Street Journal. And for those that missed the column, it's good to have you because you can give us the cliff notes on it. Though we should all read it, Dan.
Right, good.
So why reflect on this particular period in our country as a way to parallel to what we're seeing today?
Well, 2 things are going on. One, the country is beginning to, have a real feeling of anxiety and unrest about their safety in the country. It's not only San Bernardino, it's been what's been going on in the cities, Ferguson, Baltimore, soaring murder rates, and then you have Paris happening and ultimately San Bernardino. It all adds up to a kind of compressed media environment in which people see all of these bad things going on. This was similar to what happened in 1968, which was a terrible year. You had the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, riots at the Democratic Convention, and urban riots as well. And at that time, Lyndon Johnson's vice president, Hubert Humphrey, ran against Richard Nixon, who raised the law and order issue, said people do not feel secure. Hubert Humphrey was never able to get out in front of that, in part because the left and the liberals in his party wouldn't let him be as strong on the issue as Richard Nixon. Nixon won. So
you're saying now that you think that Hillary Clinton could be the Humphrey of this generation. But I want to ask you a little bit about why. Because when you hear Democrats talk about foreign policy, including our president, they do go back to the Bush administration. 9/11 happened underneath the Republican administration. We had these big wars under a Republican administration. And we, as the Democrats, this is their message, are providing a different path. Why do you think that may not work?
2 words, Jenna: gun control. After San Bernardino happened, and after the Democrats started to say this proves why we need gun control, the New York Times put it on the front of their page in an editorial, I said to myself, this party has a big problem if they're proposing gun control as the solution to domestic terrorism. And that made me think about the law and order issue back in 1968. And when you put together all of the anxiety that people are feeling, especially now about domestic terrorism, it seems to me that the Republican candidates are positioned to put Hillary Clinton on her back foot because she's running as a woman of the left now, and she is not going to be able to be as strong on this issue as any Republican candidate you can name, whether it's Donald Trump, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, or Ted Cruz.
It's an interesting parallel if we take it one step further, going back to LBJ as the creator of these big social programs. And often people say, pundits say, that when it comes to elections, it comes back to these social issues, the economy, these domestic affairs. Why do you think in this moment that it could be different? Because interestingly enough, LBJ, as you mentioned, his vice president didn't win, even though he was providing these social programs to the public. So where do you think the domestic issue and the international issues are intersecting now to be very personal for the American?
Well, let's talk about just totally in the sense of politics. Back then, Hubert Humphrey started to say, yes, we have a problem with domestic security, but we have to get at what he called the root causes of crime, a sort of sociological explanation.
And we hear that now, don't we?
And we hear something similar to that now. Richard Nixon said to Hubert Humphrey, you are soft on crime. And I think what's going to happen to Hillary Clinton is the Republicans are going to say, you are soft on terrorism. You are soft on our security because you cannot take the steps that are needed in terms of surveillance and surveilling Muslims inside the United States that are necessary to protect us.
That's so interesting. What an interesting parallel about the reasons for both issues and whether or not the
Always
American
the problem
people
for Democrats.
will agree with it. It'll be interesting to watch. Great perspective, Dan, as always. Thank you.